I am just so thrilled that SFI, PLT Canada, and Forest Ontario have joined forces tonight to deliver this amazing workforce panel. We really have a great group of ladies, and it was an accident. They just happened to all be amazing candidates, and then we have this stacked panel of ladies to present to you about their diverse career pathways. Before we get into it, we'd love to invite you to mute yourself, but also to open your cameras. We'd love to see you, say hi, but feel comfortable and leaving it off. Also, please feel free in the chat to let us know where you're coming from. We're really interested in hearing where you're coming from tonight and where you're joining us from. Say hi, put your name and anything about your location, or maybe if you're in school or other, we'd love to know. Before I start, I want to do a land acknowledgement. So I'm proud to call Treaty 9 my home. Treaty 9 is also Timmins. So I'm really proud because I'm raising my daughter on territory that's really rich in not only First Nation history, but also Métis history. And so I encourage you all to put some thought to where you reside, treaties or communities that were influential to that territory, to those lands. Okay, Mira, let's get into it. Okay, before we start, a few housekeeping items. On the next slide, Mira is going to show you a quick video. So if any of you are coming in from Quebec or Francophone in Ontario, you'll have an option to have access to the session in French today. Please feel free, camera on or off, and definitely use mute function. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. So as we go through the evening, don't hesitate to put in your comments or questions in the chat. And we also encourage you to right-click on your Zoom box. There's 3 little dots, and it gives you an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself, your name, your language, or anything else that you wanted to share with us tonight.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Mira et je vais expliquer comment accéder à l'interprétation pour le webinaire. Premièrement, cliquez sur le lien dans le clavardage pour ouvrir le navigateur Wordly. Puis, sélectionnez la langue de votre choix dans le coin supérieur droite. Et cliquez sur le bouton Audio pour entendre l'interprétation en direct. Finalement, vous devez rendre le son de Zoom web. Alors, sélectionnez la flèche à côté de Mute dans le coin inférieur gauche et cliquez sur Leave Computer Audio. Et je veux aussi signaler que si vous voulez poser une question, vous devrez l'écrire dans le clavardage ou rejoindre l'audio de l'ordinateur sur Zoom. Merci. Bonjour.
Okay, so a little bit about what you can expect. We've got an hour together and have a great discussion planned. We're going to do a bit of an intro. I'm turning it over very shortly to my colleague, Jess. You'll meet the presenters. Each of them are going to share with you a little bit about themselves, their career pathways, and share some perspective that we hope that you'll find interesting. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A. So really pay attention, don't hesitate, ask questions. That's what we're here for. That's what our panelists are here for. You can expect some really good perspective about different career pathways. So this is your opportunity to ask. We've got a really diverse panel here, so hope the questions can come in at the end. But again, don't hesitate throughout the session in the chat. And then we'll close off with some final remarks. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And I think, Jess, now it's your turn. Oh, okay. Apologies. A little bit more about SFI and PLT Canada, and just checking at the chat and some of the names that are coming in. I think many of you are new to me, so it's really nice to meet you. If you don't know about SFI, our mission is to advance sustainability through forest collaborations, and we've got different pillars of work with all kinds of programs. And so if this is your first time hearing from us, hopefully you keep in touch. Because in particular, Project Learning Tree Canada, which is an initiative of SFI, really focuses on environmental education, forest literacy, and career pathways. And our passion is to use trees and forests as windows onto the world. So if you're here you're in the PLT Canada network, you've got some connection to forests and the environment. And so as part of our Career Pathways programming, we've got green jobs, youth delegates, mentorship program, resources for you, and events like tonight's to help support you in your career pathways. And now I can turn it over to Jess.
Thanks, Christine. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. I hope you are doing great tonight. My name is Jess Kaknavicius. I am the CEO at Forests Ontario, Forest Recovery Canada, and I'm just going to give you a bit of a snapshot of who we are before we turn it over to our awesome speakers. So we are really focused on not just planting trees, but growing forests. Next slide. Organization is really focused on our forested landscapes to sustain biodiversity, healthy people, and a healthy economy. And we do that through 3 areas of work in particular. One is through our restoration work, so actually trees in the ground and helping to steward our healthy forests. 2 is through our community engagement work, where we host events and we bring people out into the forest to learn more about trees and engage in tree planting activities. And the 3rd, and why we're hosting this event tonight, is through our education work. And so we do K-12 programming in schools, as well as experiential education. Did I freeze? No, okay, we're good. As well as experiential education and training for young professionals. So a big part of that is looking at career pathways. And one of the things I'll mention is we did a research project last year called Bridging the Gap, where we really looked at what are the opportunities in the forest sector, what are some of the barriers to those opportunities, and what are youth perspectives around the forest sector. And so we'll put a link in the chat to that research if you want to dig in a little bit more. Next slide. Just in terms of the work that we do, our goal is really to help contribute to societal good. And we do that through contributing to the economy by helping to create jobs, by helping to support the local economy, by engaging people to plant trees and engaging people to work in the forest sector. We also help to contribute to biodiversity by actually getting more trees in the ground. So to date, we've planted over 43 million trees across Canada, working with hundreds of planting partners every year, and that contributes to our goal of supporting and increasing biodiversity across the landscape. We all know the role that forests can play in helping to mitigate and support and fight against climate change. And so our role is really to help create resilient forests to contribute to that impact on climate change. And last but not least, we all know, and I hope we can all appreciate the value that forests have to our communities in terms of creating that healthy benefit, whether you get outside to and enjoy outdoors, or you like looking at trees and it makes you feel better, or you have wood in your home. It's really contributing to the communities in which we work. But we're not here for me, we're not here for Christine, we're here for our awesome speakers that are joining us today. And so more of their bios can be found on the event page, which you would have used to register for the event. So I'm not going to go into heavy detail on who they are, but just as Christine mentioned, we're really excited to have some diverse perspectives as well as diverse career choices for people to highlight, how did they get to where they are? And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janice to kick us off from York Region, who is the Forestry Project Coordinator, to walk us through her career path.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jess. So as you said before, yes, I am the York Region, one of the 2 Forest Project Coordinator. I started at York Region about 2 months ago, so I'm quite new in this role. If we go to the next slide, I can kind of walk everyone through my very windy path to get to where I am today. I'm from Toronto, that's my hometown, and growing up, I didn't really do too much camping or go outside. It was very like city centric. I don't think I really knew too much about the environmental field until in 12th grade. I enrolled in this environment and natural resource management course, and as a part of the course, they had us participate in the Envirothon, which is sort of like a DECA, but for environment. So you would look at like soil and wildlife and water, and then you would compete against other school teams to show off your knowledge and complete case studies. So that was a lot of fun and got me a little bit interested. And I really had no idea going into university what I wanted to study. So I felt like geography and environmental management was really broad. I was in the co-op program. So my first green job in the sector was a GIS specialist with Environment and Climate Change Canada. Throughout my time in my undergrad, I did other co-ops in GIS, but also in construction and research and urban forestry, which is what kind of sparked my whole passion for urban forestry, sort of by accident. I had just applied for the job and it was a pretty good fit. But by the time I graduated, I got a job in environmental consulting, which after working there for about a year, I knew wasn't really where I wanted to be. And I revisited my love for urban forestry. I did some volunteering with a local organization in the GTA here called LEAF. And I think that really helped me make up my mind that I wanted to pivot and really try to pursue that passion. So I went back to school and did my Master's of Forest Conservation at the University of Toronto. And from there, I did an internship at the City of Toronto doing like engagement and outreach. And that was a lot of fun, like working the events, getting to know volunteers. I put a little bit of a smattering of past jobs. I graduated into the pandemic of 2020, so that was a little bit of a rough time. If I had to list all the little contracts I've done, it would be a very long slide. So some of the things I did was a little bit more GIS work with a local nonprofit called Ontario Nature, and then I worked for the Conservation Authority at Credit Valley. Due to the COVID protocol, I actually didn't do any community outreach. It was more like um, doing what would have been done by the volunteers with staff. So that was an interesting pivot. I took a chance and I went up to Sault Ste. Marie and did the forest policy internship. And through there, they really encouraged me to get my registered professional forester. It wasn't really something I had in mind after graduating, just because I thought like I would be in the city, but this would probably help me open up my career opportunities. So I went with it, and I did eventually get a call back to the city of Toronto, and I really wanted to come back home. So I took that chance and came back. And through there, I've moved through a couple different teams. I was a forestry data collector. That's one of the entry level positions. And I was with the forestry renewal team doing tree planting on streets and parks. And then I moved into the urban forestry grants and incentives team, where it was more geared towards private land. So landowners, homeowners, wherever we can get greenery in their private spaces, places that the city would normally be able to plant in. So I'm going to go to the next slide and talk about my current job, which is the forestry project coordinator. So I don't have any photos of this job yet. So this is one from my past one doing the event, but I will be doing events like this in this role as well. So a lot of my work revolves around green infrastructure asset collection. So anything that I guess we would track, so part of the forest, even the benches or the tree grades, that's all data that I would be responsible for collecting and writing up into report. I'm dabbling a little bit into forest certification, doing some ad hoc data project management. So like maybe creating a new application or a shortcut for staff in the field to use. And some of the other fun things I get to do is support events like the prescribed burn, native plant sale, some forest walk, and monitoring. I would say that in this role, communication collaboration is really key. I work with a lot of different teams, and so it's really nice to be able to work with other people. And I find that planning and time management plays a large role. There's so many different projects and competing deadlines. So that's something that's always top of mind. And I find that every role that I've been into, the geographic information system, that GIS portion does come back. It's always really handy to have that skill. And then on to my last slide, my tips for job seekers. So as I alluded to, there's some technical skills that I think have been really helpful. So I just lumped it all together in data analysis, but I think oftentimes we're presented with a lot of data, and you might be using Excel or SQL or R to really help make sense of this data so that you're able to tell the story with it. And I think for soft skills, openness to feedback would be my biggest takeaway. I think having so many different supervisors and managers, just being receptive of what they have to say to help improve your skills, not to take any of it personally. I added adaptability because, through the pandemic and the shift from in-person to remote, that's been a lot of adaptability and flexibility. And lastly, I added decisiveness, just even if you have a question to something, like perhaps you're not sure how something is done, I find it's nice for you to propose like a solution and just like decide how you really want to see the outcome of the problem be presented. I think in terms of skills for employment, I mentioned GIS already, but in a lot of the positions that I interviewed for, there was some component of tree, shrub, or invasive species identification. So that's something that I would say would be really helpful, whether it's just photos, or I've had instances where they gave like winter buds for us to identify. So that it can get quite difficult, I would say. And I think networking, even within your organization or coming out to events like this is always really helpful. Um, and I think mentorship has been really great. I opened myself up and I tried a whole different slew of programs. I did actually the Project Learning Tree Green Mentor program, so a little plug there. But I also did the mentorship program for the Ontario Urban Forest Council and the Ontario Professional Foresters. I know now has one too. So these are some formal programs, but even through work, you can kind of chat with other people and create like informal mentorship. And I think that's really nice to just kind of have a cheerleader by your side while you're figuring things out at work and through your career. Um, Lastly, I just wanted to plug the academic career centers that you may have at your schools. And personally, I didn't realize that there was a career coach in residence from the Toronto Public Library. They're open to, I think, beyond Toronto. They don't ask for your address or anything. You can book a time, they can review your resume, do mock interviews. So that was something I took advantage of while I was job seeking as well. So that's it from me. Thank you. I'll also drop my LinkedIn uh, link if anyone wants to stay connected after this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janice. It was great to hear about your career path and some really great tips that I would emphasize as well. Now we're going to turn it over to Sarah, who works with the OFIA. So Sarah, take it away.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be on this panel and sort of share my story with all of you. And I do hope it helps with all of your next endeavors as well. So yeah, I'm Sarah Todgham, like Jess said, with the Ontario Forest Industries Association. So that's, if I say the acronym OFIA, that's what I mean there. And just for folks that maybe don't know what an association is, it's sort of a group of, member companies. So Weyerhaeuser, for example, that Maddie is employed with, is one of our members, and we sort of bring all the members together to talk about common issues or interests and really help be that connecting piece between government and industry and help them navigate, policy development decisions and such. So yeah, a big emphasis there. I'll get to it, but for skills, a big thing is communication there, but I'll delve into that shortly. Maybe next slide. Oh, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, I truthfully have no background in forestry. Like I'm from London, Ontario, which is pretty far south. And like my mother is a dog groomer, so it's really interesting how I fell into this role. Happy to share it. I would say every summer I would go to summer camp up in the Muskoka region, and I would really enjoy the out trip portion of it, which is when you go overnight, you canoe somewhere and sleep overnight. And I loved that part of summer camp. And I even went on a 2-week canoe trip to Zektekipua, which was just a really eye-opening and life-changing experience. And funny enough, my mom told me after the fact that she also did a canoe trip in the same provincial park, different camp. So it's just funny how it's all full circle there. And so I didn't put it here for my educational experience, but I'll maybe just quickly touch upon it. My background, just like Janice, is actually in GIS. That's what I have my undergrad in. I got it from Western University. And from there, I just wanted to do something in environment, and late night Google search, I stumbled upon the Masters of Forest Conservation program at the University of Toronto, and I just went for it, and I sort of had an open mind to it, and I really enjoyed my experience there. And a big part of that actually was this internship program with the MFC program. And so that's when I got to work at the Sustainable Forestry Initiative as a research assistant or even intern. And I had a really fortunate opportunity where I got to interview like chief foresters, lead biologists across Canada and got to ask them, you know, how they're managing for water, how they're managing for biodiversity and carbon. And I remember just being blown away for every interview I had, and really enjoyed those conversations and learned so much. And I wanted to keep going with that. So I did find myself in a position with the Forest Products Association of Canada. So that's basically the national association for forestry, or the national equivalent of OFIA. And I was their manager of sustainability and environment there. So got to learn quite intimately things like Species at Risk Act, Canada Navigable Waters Act, Fisheries Act, as well as some files such as protected areas and also climate change as well, like looking at how forest management can better manage for climate change impacts. And so from there, I got a really, great opportunity to work for a forestry company called Louisiana Pacific. I was their forest certification and public policy specialist there. So that was an international position. I was even able to get them certified in South America to PFC, which was a really big accomplishment, and even got them certified to the brand new SFI certification, Christine, which is a great opportunity to be able to know the standards so intimately. But from there, I got another opportunity to sort of expand my horizons outside of forestry. I was a policy consultant and I got to do, policy work for transportation companies, mining, all sorts, which was a really good experience. But I did find, I did want to come back to forestry specifically. And that's where I ended up in as the policy manager for the OFIA. And I've been there for about 9 months now, and it's been a really good run. I'll maybe go into my, the next slide. So yeah, I've only been there for a couple months, but I was able to grab some like pretty great pictures over the last couple months. And I would say my main role there is to monitor and track, evaluate, and report on policies, emerging issues, and government initiatives. But I also organize meetings and events on behalf of the membership. So the ones that I'm primarily responsible for is woodlands, so forest management, Indigenous relations, and manufacturing. And I also get to do the occasional site visit. As you can see, I'm on, I think it's a forwarder here. And then I also get to go to Queen's Park occasionally. This is with our intern last year with Sabrina. And then also me presenting at a board meeting there at the bottom, which is really great. I feel like my job is so different from day to day, which is something that I really appreciate in a position. I didn't put skills, but I'll very quickly say, for this type of position, it's really good to have good communication, especially written and oral communication, good interpersonal skills as well, which I know is a little scary, coming out of university or college or a technician course, to be in the real world, but it's really not that bad. And there's sort of skills. I know Project Learning Tree and Forest Ontario have developed some really good resources for folks. I'm sure they can pass them along. But yeah, just getting lots of practice with that, with networking, is really important. As well, I found that my background in GIS, even though I never use it anymore, and I think it would be really quite entertaining for someone to watch me try to navigate a GIS program right now. But I think what I got from all of those labs and courses is a good and strong analytical thinking. And I think that's something that's carried throughout my career and sort of helping me connect the dots and gather information and apply it. As well, time management, I think that's really with a lot of different roles that are out there, and balancing priorities. Like I said, my day-to-day is very different. Sometimes I go into it thinking that I'm going to work on A, B, and C, and then, I get a curveball, but I do like that it keeps me on my toes. As well as continual learning. I feel like I'm learning so much from my members all the time, going to site visits, and I'm sure that will not stop, which I also appreciate. I think we can go to the next slide. So yeah, I sort of alluded to some tips, but networking and relationship building is really big. I think most of the jobs that I've had and roles has been sort of through a connection directly or indirectly to help get my foot in the door. So I think it's really good, to maintain those connections as best you can. Add people on LinkedIn. That's a really good way to just get to know somebody and just get your name out there and promote yourself. And good advice that I was given early in my career is if you don't know what to do or how to interact with people at first, like, my go-tos are like to always thank people if they go out of their way to do something for you. Like everybody loves to be thanked or appreciated or acknowledged. But also ask questions about themselves. Like people, generally do like to talk about themselves, or like that's an easy thing to talk about because who knows yourself more than yourself. So, and I think as well, another thing that's really benefited me is just being curious. Like, if I go into a situation and just ask questions, oh, why do you know, write the report this way is, because sometimes there's sort of procedures or things that are reasons why it's like that, but you can also, ask questions and maybe find opportunities to maybe change things or improve things over time. And again, that's another way to promote yourself. But being curious and asking questions is something that's been advantageous for me. As well, as you can see from the previous slide, like my pathway to success has not been linear. I've had many different positions and, I'm still paving my way. And so I think at least myself, I had this perception when I graduated from my program is that I would get my job right out of the gates and that's where I'd be for many, many years. And I would get that acknowledgement when I retired that I was there for 40, 50 years, whatever it is. But, more normally today is you'll sort of take every opportunity as a learning experience. And, sometimes you'll even identify things that you don't like in a role, and then you can sort of seek things that you do like. So always learn from your experiences, take the good with the bad. So, and always have a positive attitude going into it as well. So I think those are my top three.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. I was at an event a couple weeks ago and I said, take interesting opportunities because you never know what you might learn. And so I agree. You might learn you might not like something and that's still something you've learned. So
Exactly.
thanks for walking us through your career path. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lauren from York Region.
Hi everyone, I'm really happy to be here. My name is Lauren Hogar and I am a forestry technician in the operation department at York Region. I'll go into my next slide. So Sarah, you're totally right, it is not linear. Mine goes back and forth between work and education. So I started working at Hydro One in 2009 and I wasn't anywhere near forestry. I started as a meter reader, but as the meters started to be read remotely, they no longer needed that role and we no longer had to go door to door reading them. So they offered a forestry labor position and I jumped on that. Like you get to work outside and stay fit while getting paid. That sounded really good. And I did that for about 5 years. And Hydro One started to offer a forestry technician job as well. But you did need a formal education in forestry, which at that time I did not have. I did police foundations at Seneca College right out of high school. But I did not pursue that. So I found out what I needed to be able to qualify for this forestry technician job that I wanted, and a 1-year urban forestry certification at Fleming College is what would get me there. Now, to graduate with that certification, I needed an 80-hour placement. And through Fleming College, I did hear that the town of Newmarket was one that a student has done before. And I found out who the supervisor was, and that's who I wanted to work for. And actually, that student is still there right now and still enjoying it there. So that was my entry into the municipal forestry sector, and that's where I wanted to stay. So I did stay there. I worked at the town of Newmarket for about 3 years within various contracts. And then that made me look into what jobs I wanted in the future. And I did realize that the jobs I saw myself in, you still required a diploma. And at that point, I did not have a diploma. So back to school I went. I went back to Fleming College and I did the Urban Forestry Technician program. And then within a week of getting that diploma, there was a job offered at York Region and I applied for it and I got an interview and I've been there for about a year and a half now. I'm currently living in Sanford, which is near Uxbridge, and it's about a 20-minute drive to work. I'm ready for the next slide. So what I do at work mostly is contract management. So the one that I specifically get to manage is structural pruning of the trees in our boulevard. And this, we offer our contractors an orientation to let them know what we expect of them, as well as site visits, the work being inspected, and we also have to prepare the work for them. And on other days within the week, I could be doing internal tree work. So we will be doing pruning and tree removal ourselves in response to customer concerns. There is a lot of team collaboration. So we could be helping out with other contracts. For example, you know, in springtime, the big one in demand is the tree planting. So that's actually something that I will move from operations into the renewal department and help them out with that. There is a lot of training and development too. So York offers a lot internally. So there's a lot of vehicle and commercial vehicle training, as well as external training. If there is a course that would benefit us, we are able to explore those options. There's a lot of focus on health and safety. So on job sites, we want to do tailboards and traffic protection. And I also manage the PPE required for our team, and that includes ordering and just making sure everyone has what they need. And there's a big focus as well on organization, communication, and time management. So we do have a lot of people relying on us, contractors, our co-workers as well, and we want to make sure that we meet those deadlines. We have a lot of files and work to prepare for our contractors, so we do want to make sure that we get all that in time, which is also that's a big one for tips for job seekers as well. So I can go into that slide. So if you are a student, you have such a unique advantage when it comes to seeking out jobs, because there's so many jobs there that are only for students. And another big one too is seasonal jobs at municipalities. Some of them might not necessarily in the job description say that it is forestry. So when I did go work at Town and Newmarket, that was just a seasonal parks job. And what I did a lot of in Town and Newmarket was forestry, and I learned so much there. There was a lot of lots of variety of work to do, and it was incredible. But I would have never known this unless it came from networking and understanding like who worked there and what job, like what sort of job roles are offered. So that's a good one to look for, and sometimes they might be hidden in the job description too, in those municipal seasonal jobs. So take advantage of training and networking opportunities. You're doing that right now. You're all here, and you can ask all the questions at the end. There's also other things like the ISAO conference, like they have a special rate for students, and we did see a lot of them this past year. And then research your potential employers, employees, and supervisors. So you want to know what the company's about. And when it comes to employees and supervisors, you want to know who's there, because they're going to become your mentors. They're going to become the people that you use for references moving forward. And apply for all the jobs that you're interested in. Don't limit yourself, because some companies, you might be what they're looking for. They might be looking for someone who is flexible and adaptable and wants to learn. And maybe that's more important to them than someone who checks every single box and every single requirement that's there. And another big one that I notice as a trend is ISA certification seems to be a requirement. So work towards getting that, or RPF if you're qualified for that. And yeah, that's it for me. And thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lauren. I'm seeing a trend of networking as a top skill or top tip for job seekers. And there's someone at SFI who often says your network is your net worth. And so you'll find a lot of times that jobs are not posted and they come just because you know someone. So definitely some good tips there. All right, we are going over to our last speaker, who will end it off, and then we'll open it up from questions. So hopefully you guys have been typing some or writing some down somewhere. And with that, I'll turn over to Maddie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I know I've learned lots from the previous panelists, so I'm sure you are as well. And I hope I can give you a different perspective on maybe a different part of the industry that you hadn't considered before. Because when I graduated from forestry, I did not think I would end up in operations, and here I am. So I'm an operations forester for Weyerhaeuser in Kenora. And I can go to the next slide now, and I'll give you a little idea of how I got here. It's a little less windy than some of the other ones tonight, but I was born and raised in Toronto. So obviously big city, but I was really interested in nature and the outdoors. And my parents, when starting at around the age of 8, started sending me to summer camp. So another summer camp connection. And the summer camp that I went to actually also made maple syrup. So when I became a counselor, I got to get involved in the maple syrup side of things, and the gentleman who looked after that side of their business, I just really looked up to him. He was so knowledgeable about the trees and what he was doing, and I thought his job was so cool. He got to be outside all the time, so he was kind of like my model for what I wanted to do. So when I was looking at there's like a list in grade 12, they give you like a list of all the university and college programs, and I just saw forestry and I was like, that sounds like something that would get me somewhere around there where he's working. So I ended up going to Lake for forestry. I have no family connection to the forest industry, no real concept of what the forest industry even was growing up in Toronto. And when I got there, like a lot of the first year students did have that family connection to forestry. But I took to it well, and I was really interested in my classes, really interested in the field work, and it ended up being a great decision for me. So I spent my summers working for the Saskatchewan Research Council, doing your typical summer work. So tree plant supervision and regeneration surveys. But they were also doing an assisted migration trial at the time. So I was doing data collection for that. And then I got to use that data set for my undergraduate thesis. So that was a nice perk of that job, and it was an interesting project to work on. So when I graduated, I applied all across Canada, all different kinds of positions, and I ended up getting a job with the Canadian Institute of Forestry, part of their internship program. So their national conference was going to be in Kenora the following year. So I spent the year preparing for that conference, and I was based out of the Weyerhaeuser office in Kenora because they just offered to host me. So during that year, I did a lot of job shadowing with the foresters here. But a lot of my job was just organizing that conference, which didn't really feel like a true forestry job. It was a lot of just organizational tasks, but it was a great year for me because I met so many different people. It was a big steering committee planning the conference, and then being at the conference and meeting so many people, and spending time with the foresters here at Weyerhaeuser. It ended up being a very great year for me. I learned a lot and met a lot of people. And just as that internship was ending, Weyerhaeuser had posted for an operations forester position. And so I applied. It was perfect timing. We really wanted to stay in Kenora, my husband and I. So I applied, I got it, and I've been here for about 8 years in that position. So a typical day in the life of an operations forester. So the typical duties would include managing contracts for log purchases, maintaining contractor relationships, forecasting wood flow. So our mill is purchased wood and our own licenses. So you have to kind of forecast a year in advance where the wood is coming from so that you're supplying the mill with the right amount of wood at the right time. So that's kind of a complex process and takes a lot of communication with the contractors. Safety and environmental audits, road and block layout, compliance inspections. So that's like during and after harvest, going and assessing the block to make sure that all the rules and regulations were followed. And you need a special certification to actually submit those compliance reports. So that's an extra certification you can get. It's quite relevant to operations forestry. Operationalizing a block, so assessing merchantability, access, identifying modern crossings, and then just general operational planning, figuring out where contractors are going and when, and making sure the blocks are in the AWS and that kind of organizational stuff. Stuff that's unique to my role that's not necessarily like a typical duty of an operations forester. I have my scaler's license, so sometimes I scale for Crown dues. I do our kind of public outreach program, so I do a lot of school visits. I organize our local envirothon, which is a very small envirothon, and stuff like that, which I really enjoy doing, and my boss kind of frees me up to do because I have a passion for it. So a typical day for an operations forester, I'll use today as an example because it's a pretty typical day for me. So I look after our integrated fiber planning. So that's kind of figuring out our long-term wood forecast, figuring out if we're adhering to our forecast deliveries or if we're above or below, figuring out if the mill is consuming more or less than they said they were going to consume. And on a daily level, that means that I calculate our inventory, our log yard inventory every morning. So I come in, I calculate the deliveries we got the night before or the day before, figure out what the mill produced, which I kind of calculate to see how much wood that you would use. And then I come up with a number for our log inventory and share that with our team. So that's what I did this morning. And then I had a couple of meetings. There was actually a safety incident at one of our mills in the States. So I had some follow-up with that, some calls to action for our site. And then I had a little bit of admin work, some contracts to maintain. And then I headed out to the bush this afternoon to do some scaling. Scaling is not super typical of my work. Usually I'd just be going out to see a contractor because a lot of the work is just maintaining those relationships with our contractors. So that would be a typical day in my job. And then also something that I forgot to mention that's like not typical operations forester, but our site is certified to the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. So I sit on the SFI implementation committee, and I'm currently the chair of that committee. So that takes up a bit of my time as well. But I learn lots through that, and networking it's another great networking opportunity with other foresters across Ontario and Manitoba. So my tips for job seekers. First, if you're currently looking for a job, like looking for your first job in forestry or looking for your next job in forestry, is one, to be open to different locations. I had never been to Kenora when I applied for the job here, and I absolutely love it. And now I've been here for almost 10 years. Apply for stretch jobs. So Lauren kind of touched on this too, but even if you don't meet every single requirement of a job, if it's a job that you feel passionate about, if it's a company that you feel passionate about and you're really interested in it, just apply anyways. There's certain personality types that tend to do that and certain personality types that won't. I am the latter, and I challenge myself to stretch myself and apply for jobs that maybe I don't meet tick every box for. So if you're like me and that's not your tendency, try to challenge yourself to do that, and explore different sides of the forestry sector. So I was I would say, closed off to operations when I took the job with the CIF. Like, I did not think that's what I would want to do. And I've been doing it for 8 years now, and I've carved out a role that I really enjoy with Weyerhaeuser. So just be open to different sides of the sector. It's such a diverse sector. And then my tips, if you're new to the industry, you have your first job maybe, is to find local networking opportunities like everyone has said. Your local CIF chapter might have some events that you can join. Explore mentorship program. We mentioned the PLT Canada one. And ask questions. I feel like a mistake I made early in my career was I was really afraid to sound silly and ask a silly question. But really, like, you sound smarter if you ask questions and people think that you're interested in and trying to grasp what's happening around you. So I think definitely ask more questions. And then some helpful skill sets, starting with more of the hard skills, computer skills, Microsoft, obviously, like everyone's pretty familiar with Word, but if you're not super comfortable with Excel, try to get more comfortable with it. GIS experience, you don't have to be a GIS professional, but just a working knowledge of GIS is really helpful in operations and other types of art like planning and silviculture as well. A driver's license, if you're looking for summer work as a silviculture forester or an operations forester, it's going to be a non-starter if you don't have your driver's license because you have to be able to drive to the field sites. So if you don't have your driver's license, try and get it as soon as you can. And try to, if you have an opportunity to practice driving in bush roads, I know that's one of the questions that our site asks when we're hiring summer students. And if you can say, yes, I've driven on bush roads before, I'm comfortable with it, it just helps. Scaler's license and compliance inspector, those are extra certifications that can, help you just stand out from other applicants. Drone pilot license, there's lots of companies that are using drones for various things like regeneration surveys or compliance monitoring. So getting your drone pilot license would be a good one that you could do on your own. And then moving more into the soft skills, we've talked about lots of these, but communication, organizational skills. So there's lots of, at most jobs, there's lots of different things and tasks you have to juggle and try and figure out what works for you to remember the key things that you're working on. Being innovation minded, forestry is as a sector is really moving towards a focus on innovation. So if you have a mind for innovation, that can be very helpful. And having, a mindset of problem solving, approaching things with a resolution mindset, and working through a problem is very helpful. So those are my tips, and I'll put my email in the chat, and please feel free to connect with me if you're interested in the operational side of forestry.
Thanks for that, Maddie. And wow, we obviously selected you panelists because we thought you had interesting career pathways, but it was really impressive and interesting to hear, and certainly learned a lot of things that I didn't even know about you. And Maddie, I do think it's interesting for you to put your contacts and all of you in the chat. Already Vincent has come in and said he's definitely interested in the more traditional forestry experience. So hopefully Vincent, Maddie's presentation was relevant and interesting. Before we get into the Q&A, because there's a couple of other comments in the chat, I really want to encourage you you participants. First of all, thanks for joining us. You heard from the panelists the importance of being curious, networking, asking questions. So really put some thought. We'd love to hear your stories, anything that you learned today. Was this helpful? Do you need more? Before we get into some questions, I did want to share SFI and Project Learning Tree Canada. I told you before when we were talking about our Career Pathways program, we have a youth delegates program, which is a group of young adults that are students or young professionals between the ages of, Mira will correct me if I say this wrong, but between the ages of 18 and 30, who are in some forest and conservation related fields. So I think many of you in the chat will be eligible. We do encourage you to apply. Our next youth delegate is for the Atlanta SFI conference in Georgia in the month of June. And with a scholarship, you get the trip paid. And not only do you attend the conference, but you also have access to some career pathways programming during the conference. You'll be supported and participate in some activities, headshots, network with your colleagues, and also have access to a mentor at the conference. And so definitely a great opportunity for you to learn more, to connect, and then to sort of have access to a new network. So we're just about to close applications on April 6th. So really hoping that you'll take your phone out, scan this, and submit your applications.
Christine, can I just add something really quick?
Yeah, of course.
So I was a successful applicant for a version of this a couple of years ago. And this is where I met like one of my previous bosses and like a lot of people that, you know, I still work with today. So I just want to advocate like how instrumental or like a big part of my pathway, you know, being able to have that opportunity was.
Excellent point. I mean, I think we heard from all of you the importance of either participating in a mentorship program, of networking. You have an opportunity to access jobs based on your network versus necessarily searching the web. Like, I don't particularly find that Indeed is a very pleasant experience for job searchers. And then Jess and I would probably echo some of those comments about the power of networking, in terms of not just securing your next job, but in terms of, you know, your professional development and your ability to access all kinds of opportunities. And so with that, would love to see if there are any questions. And if not, I'll ask one, since there was a comment in the chat. Curious if you have any perspective. Typically, I've always thought of it as urban versus traditional forestry, urban environment versus rural versus northern, because you've heard from Sarah. Sarah technically is traditional forestry, but she works in downtown Toronto at King and Yonge, could not be more downtown Toronto. And so it doesn't mean that if you want to live in the city, you don't have an opportunity to work for the forestry sector. But would love to hear if anyone has any comments, you know, remote, virtual, you know, if I relocate to Thunder Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, or Kenora, do I have to live there forever? What kind of doors does relocation open up? Are there opportunities, you know, with any virtual type jobs now that we're in this hybrid world? Does anyone have any perspectives or comments about any of those? Any remote job in forestry will be great. See, people are interested, either because they want to know, can I work remotely? Or if I relocate, how long do I have to relocate for? So maybe Maddie, I'll pick on you for this one, and then rest of the panelists, please chime in.
So were you wanted to know like remote opportunities in operations, or?
I think you and I are both going to say there's no such thing as a remote opportunity in operations yet. Yet.
I would say, yeah, like the type of job that I do in operations is, you know, you have to be on site. But there's other, I would say, like certification is kind of related to operation. Like if you're interested in what's happening in the forest, there are more remote jobs in maybe like forest certification or something like that.
I'm wondering, Lauren or Jen, is it possible to be in an urban forestry job remotely? Not at all, partially? What do you ladies think?
Well, Lauren will probably tell you the same thing, but we recently got our mandated return to work. So I think prior to that, being quite remote was possible. But now that we have some mandatory days in, I think even in our roles, we do have to come in. Even if you're not like in the field per se, you're just in the office. But I think they're trying to cultivate that like cultural experience of having coworkers and some relationship building. I did want to comment that one of the reasons I did choose to go further away from the GTA and take that chance in Sault Ste. Marie is that I didn't think that I would get that opportunity as quickly in Toronto. Like it's a really high competitive environment. There's more job applicants that you're, I guess, fighting against. So I think for me, that was a really great opportunity to learn something that I probably wouldn't have had the chance to do if I didn't go there. So just wanted to add that, yeah, location, I think sometimes you do have to make the sacrifice, but if you do want to come back, you can bring all your newfound skills and take them with you to your next job.
Thanks, Janice. And I think it's some good food for thought, because sometimes we're afraid of relocating, but you can always challenge yourself to say, I'll relocate, and if I don't like it, I can always come back. And if I relocated and I didn't like it, did that relocation open up some doors that maybe I wouldn't have if I would never have moved? Now, if you know for sure you don't want to leave the city, then maybe being an operations forester is just not for you. So always things to keep in mind. And then for the panelists, there is a question from Vincent. with simply a BSc and no proper schooling in forestry apart from 2 years tree planting, I think based on that's some good forestry. That's a good forestry baseline, a Bachelor of Science with 2 years of tree planting. Is it feasible to work in the forestry field, or does it usually require specific education? Operations forester looks like a cool job. I paraphrase there.
I think like with a Bachelor of Science, like for example, in operations forestry, you don't need your RPF status to do like I don't need it personally to do the work that I do. I have it just to have it, but you don't really need it to do certain roles in operations. So I would still, if you're interested in operations, I would apply to roles. If you're still in school, I would apply to summer opportunities. If you graduated school with a BSc and summer experience in forestry, I think you have a good time finding some work in forestry. And please, Vincent, feel free to send me an email if you have any more questions about that.
I would also add as well, I think if you're willing to pursue an RPF accreditation, a big part of that is mentorship and on the job, work and experience. So as long as you're working under an RPF, you can obtain that skill and bridge that gap. There's a way to become an RPF without coming from an accredited program. It does take a bit more effort, but it can be done. And I think as long as, you're interested, I think folks are willing to help you. That's a big thing about the forest sector is I think, if you have that passion, like people will be willing to help you out.
Those are important comments. Becoming a registered professional forester, and maybe for those of you in the room, just to add a little bit more context, if you want to practice forestry in the sense that you're signing off on a forest management plan, you have to be an RPF. So for some positions, it will be a requirement that you be a registered professional forester. It's not a requirement of an operational role. Some of the best operations folks that I've ever known have a technician or a techs or forest techs, but they know, they love, they breathe the bush. And that's the most important thing. That's what will make you an effective operations person, is just loving to be outdoors. Me personally, I was always afraid of being alone, cold. I thought that driving on roads was the tough one. So it's just really about like what it is that you like, but certainly you don't need to be an RPF to access all kinds of interesting forestry positions. Jess, I think you had a question.
Yeah, it happens to be that you're all women, and so I'm curious if you have any advice for women looking at their career paths ahead of them.
A big one for me would be mentorship. And I think a great group to be a part of is called Women in Wood. You can hear from many different women, in the forest sector, all the different roles that they play and maybe things that they encounter in the bush, for example, and how they've overcome that. So I think, that group's talked about just about everything. And I think it's comforting to know if someone else is encountering maybe something that you are as well. And just hearing the different advice that the women around the table have. So I think that's a good starting point. Thanks, Allison, for adding that.
I can jump in with a comment too. Women in Arboriculture puts on a lot of events to go to as well. And there was Krista Stratting spoke at the ISAO conference, and she talked a lot about the climbing competition. And she said being at the climbing competition and the events like Women in Arboriculture, it really brought everyone together to help mold her into who she is, because once you're not in a work setting, she found that more of the males were very much so more willing to help in that environment over work. So that's one that kind of stuck with me.
Awesome, thanks. And I think I'll emphasize what a couple of you said, which is in particular for women, is apply even if you don't think that you might be the right fit, because often women overlook that. So apply, and you never know when you might get a chance. Awesome. Well, we're at 7. So this brings the end, or wait, we have one quick question. Could you please clarify whether the forestry sector currently accepts international students? I would say it depends on the employer. And so definitely look at the employer, look at different opportunities to see if they would potentially take on an international student. There's also some Government of Canada programs, but I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that in terms of international students. Yes,
I
Lauren.
do. We actually had an international employee at York Region in a seasonal role.
Perfect. So there might be seasonal opportunities. And for those that are looking for jobs, between January and now is like the hot time to be looking for summer positions. So those seasonal roles are out, if not already filled. There's definitely some. So keep your eyes open next year around January. That's when a lot of them launch.
I would say like even we start recruiting in October of that year before, which seems crazy early, but start looking like right at the beginning of the school year.
Awesome. Christine, did you have anything else to add?
Well, I just think hopefully this session inspired you, and I see another question now about GIS. So I think keep the questions going. All of us are accessible on LinkedIn. Maybe Janice put some thought to how you answer this final question in 30 seconds while I wrap up. But we're all accessible. Find us on LinkedIn, connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to hear your stories. We want to hear what you're interested in and seeing what our opportunities are to make some connections and support you. So keep in touch with Forest Ontario's program, keep in touch with PLT Canada and SFI, follow the organizations on LinkedIn, and just get out there and continue to tune up to sessions like this. Okay, Janice, forestry and GIS.
Yeah,
Internationally, did you see the question?
I did read it quickly, but if you wanted to recap it, you can do so and then I'll answer.
Sure. Just with your experience in forestry and GIS, if you've got any insights on how an internationally trained professional, and this is relevant because we do have international students and internationally trained professionals in all kinds of sectors, but how they can show their value proposition to an Ontario or a Canadian employer.
Yeah, I think that during the interview, something that's really like been helpful to put me apart from other applicants is I bring a portfolio of my work with me so that they can see that this is something that I can create solutions for what they're looking for. And this is sort of like a more rare case, but if you were able to chat with someone that works there or you have a good idea of what types of problems or issues that they run into, you could actually propose one of your solutions there. And I think that really helps set you apart as a GIS professional to show that analytical thinking and you can walk them through your thought process. And I think that's really powerful.
Okay, thanks, Janice. I'm giving a minute to see if Jess has any other closing comments. Otherwise, thank you. Stay in touch. Let us know what else you want, any more topics or any other content that we can cover, we can consider for the next panel, because there will be one.
Thanks, everyone.
I know we don't want to close because we want to see all the thank you messages, but okay, thank you, and see you soon.
If you would like a work experience in the forest and conservation sector, or would like to learn about our mentorship program and career resources, visit pltcanada.org.